The rain poured down in relentless sheets that night, the kind that made the world outside seem to vanish in a blur of gray. Ethan Cole sat alone in his study, the soft hum of the fireplace doing little to ease the silence that clung to his massive mansion. To the world, Ethan was everything: young, brilliant, and impossibly rich. The billionaire who turned a garage startup into a global empire. The man who had it all. But behind the walls of glass and marble, Ethan lived in a silence too heavy for his age. Money had built his walls high and his heart cautious. His parents had died when he was 16, and he'd learned early that people often smiled at his fortune, not at him. That night, as thunder shook the mansion, Ethan poured himself another cup of coffee and turned toward the window. But then, he heard it. A faint sound. A rustle. It wasn't the wind. Frowning, he stood, listening again. It was coming from the far corner of the hallway, near the pantry. He moved quietly, his steps soft on the marble floor. When he reached the kitchen, the lights flickered. He turned on his phone's flashlight and pointed it toward the pantry door. There it was again. A shuffle. A whisper. He took a deep breath and pulled open the door. And froze. There, crouched behind a stack of flour bags, was a little girl, maybe 7 years old. Her hair was tangled, her clothes soaked from the rain, and her small arms clutched a torn backpack to her chest. Her wide brown eyes met his, filled with terror. "Please, don't call the police," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan blinked, taken aback. "What are you doing here? How did you get in?" She hesitated, her lips quivering. "The gate was open. I just needed somewhere warm." Her voice was small, fragile. Ethan knelt down, softening his tone. "Are you alone? Where are your parents?" She didn't answer. She just looked at him, and something in those eyes made him stop asking. Instead, he said, "You must be freezing. Come with me." He led her to the kitchen, handed her a towel, and turned on the stove to warm some soup. She watched him with a mix of fear and disbelief, as if she couldn't quite trust the kindness. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Lila," she murmured. "Lila Grace." "Lila," he repeated, smiling faintly. "Pretty name." She didn't smile back. When she finally ate, she did so cautiously, as if afraid the food might be taken away. Ethan didn't press her with questions. He just sat quietly across from her, watching this tiny stranger who had somehow walked past security into his mansion, and into his quiet, guarded world. When she finished, she looked down at her bowl. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm sorry I came here. I didn't mean to steal anything." "It's okay," he said softly. "You didn't steal anything." She hesitated, then asked in a shaky voice, "You're not mad?" Ethan sighed, shaking his head. "No, Lila. Just surprised." He gave her a blanket and let her sleep on the couch that night. As he stood there, watching her drift off, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this quiet, rain-soaked night, was changing something inside him. The next morning, the sun rose pale and gentle through the curtains. Lila was gone. Panic gripped Ethan's chest. He checked every room, the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, until he found her outside, sitting by the fountain in his garden, staring at the water. She turned when she heard him. "I didn't mean to scare you," she said quickly. "I just wanted to see the garden before I leave." He frowned. "You don't have to leave." "I can't stay," she whispered. "People like me don't belong here." Something in her words hit him harder than he expected. He crouched beside her. "What do you mean, people like you?" She looked down at her shoes. "My mom used to clean houses like this. Until she got sick. After she died, I stayed with my aunt. But she didn't want me." Her voice cracked. "So I ran away." I've been sleeping in parks, behind stores. I just wanted a place that felt safe for one night. Ethan felt his throat tighten. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. Finally, he said, "Lila, you don't have to go back to that. You can stay here until we figure something out." Her eyes widened in disbelief. "You'd let me stay?" He nodded. "For now." That night, as she slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Ethan stared at the old photo of his parents on the wall, remembering how they used to open their doors to anyone in need. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped doing that. But Lila had walked in, and reminded him what humanity looked like. Days passed. Lila began to smile again. She helped the maids bake cookies, played with the gardener's dog, and filled the mansion with laughter Ethan hadn't heard in years. She was like sunlight spilling into forgotten corners of his home, and his heart. One afternoon, while Ethan was in his office, she walked in holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Mr. Ethan," she said softly. "Can I show you something?" "Of course," he said. She handed it to him. It was a drawing, childish but full of heart. It showed a big house, with her standing next to him, both smiling. At the bottom, in messy handwriting, she'd written, "Thank you for finding me." He stared at the words, his chest tightening. "Lila, this is beautiful." She smiled shyly. "I just wanted you to know, I don't feel invisible anymore." Those words, "I don't feel invisible anymore," hit him like a storm. That night, as he sat alone, he realized something. For years, he had measured his worth in profits and headlines. But now, this little girl had shown him something no business deal ever could, that kindness could change lives. The next morning, Ethan made some calls. Within weeks, he set up a foundation to support homeless children. The Lila Grace Foundation. When the press asked why, he simply said, "Because one day, I found a child who reminded me what being human means." Months later, at the grand opening of a new children's shelter, Lila stood beside him, now healthy, smiling, her hair tied neatly with a ribbon. She clutched his hand tightly. "You know," she whispered, "my mom used to say that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes, they wear suits and have sad eyes." Ethan laughed softly, brushing a tear away. "Then I guess I met one, too." "Who?" she asked. "You," he said. "You were the angel who walked into my life and changed everything." The crowd applauded as Ethan knelt to cut the ribbon, but in that moment, the world seemed to blur away, and all he could see was the little girl who had once been hiding in his pantry, scared and alone. Now, she stood in the sunlight, her laughter echoing like a promise, that even in the loneliest places, kindness can find its way home. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the young billionaire who thought he had everything, finally understood what it meant to be rich. Not in money, but in heart. Because sometimes, the smallest voice can speak the loudest truth. And the simplest words can change everything.